This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Recording in progress.
Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Abayim. We have two amazing subjects to do today, both of them brief but very powerful. The first one is on Daf Pei Tesamud Beis. The Gemara wanted to know, how do we know that a almana from Erisin has a ksuba, even if it's not written, but it's mitnai bezdin? That's the discussion. And in that discussion, the Gemara quotes a brisa. The Gemara says that if your wife is an arusa and she dies, you're not an oinen, and you're not matama to her. So what does it mean you're not matama to her? That means if you're a kohen, you're not matame to her. Normally a kohen is matame to his wife. A kohen cannot be matame to someone, but to one of the 7 relatives you're allowed to be matame. So normally a kohen is matame to his wife, but if she's an arusa, a kohen is not matame to her. Furthermore, if she is an arusa, she does not become an oinen, and she is not matame to him. That's the $1 million question. What does it mean she is not matame to him? After all, only a kohen cannot be matame to relatives. Only a kohen cannot be matame. A kohenes has no prohibition of being matama'a. So what does it mean that if she is an arusa, she is not matame? Why not? She could be matame to him. Just because she's a kohenes, she could be matame to him. So says Rashi, she's not obligated to be involved with him, and to be matame to him. Ben kohenes, whether she's a kohenes, ben Yisraelis, or whether she's Yisraelis. Afal pi, even though shemitzvah latame l'mesim, ha'amurim b'parsha, even though it's a mitzvah to be matame to relatives that are said in the parsha, k'dechsiv, like it says, la yitama, to her you should be matame, but nevertheless, zu eina chayeves, an arusa is not chayev. V'la mishum kohenes nakala. It didn't pick it because of kohenes. Shloi huzaru kohenes m'latame l'mesim. A kohenes is not warned of being matame to mesim. So in other words, when the brisa says that a arusa is not matame to him, it means she's not obligated to be matame to him. Because normally, one is obligated to be matame to their relatives, okay? There's a chiyuv to be matame to one's relative. From this Gemara we see that one is obligated to be matame to a relative. If a relative dies, one does not have a choice and say, well, I'll give it to the Chevra Kadisha to take care of. I don't want to be matame. You have an obligation to be matame to relatives. Okay, that's what we see from the words in the Gemara, that an oinen, that an arusa, eina mitama'a. What does it mean, eina mitama'a? Eina mitama'a means, v'loi mitama'loi means she's not obligated to, because she's only an arusa. But if she was an asua, she would be obligated to, even if she's not a kohenes. In other words, from here we learn that someone is obligated to be matame themselves to relatives. That's the only way to understand the brisa. V'loi mitamala, she's not matame to him. It doesn't mean she's not allowed to, right? So she would be allowed to. This arusa would be allowed to. Eina mitama means she's not obligated to, which implies that normally you are obligated to. So this would be a clear source. In other words, somebody would ask you, if a relative dies, are you obligated to matame to them? The answer is yes. What's the source? Kesuvos Pei Tesamud Beis, where it says that arusa is not matama. It doesn't mean she's not allowed to, it means she's not obligated to, but everyone else is obligated to. So comes the Rambam, and the way the Rambam paskins seems to be against this Gemara. Because in Hilchos Avelos, the Rambam says in Halacha, Perek Beis Halacha Vav, Kama chamura mitzvah avelos. How stringent is a mitzvah avelos? Shaharei nidches loy hatuma mibnei kroivav. Because tumah is pushed off for a relative. Kedei sheyisasek imahen. In order to involve oneself with them, v'yisabel alehem. Shenamar, ki im l'sheiroi hakaroi ve'lav, li'imai, like your wife who's close to you, to your mother, lo yitama, to her you're matame. Mitzvahs aseh, it's a positive command. Shem lo yiratza litame, if you don't want to be matame, mitamen oisai al karchai, we contaminate you against your will. You know that? If a kohen says, I don't want to be matame to a relative, he's obligated to, and we matame him against his will. This is by male kohanim, shehuzur al atuma. Aval ha-kohanais, but a female kohen, hoyel ve'enon musharas al atuma, since they are not adjured from becoming tamei, kain enon mitzuvos l'stamei l'kroivim. They are likewise not obligated to become tamei to kroivim. The Rambam learns the chiyuv of being tamei to kroivim is only the male kohen, not the kohenes, because the reason why we're matame is to show that taking care of a relative even overrides tumah. But women who are not commanded on tumah, so a woman's not commanded on tumah, is not obligated to be matame. You're only obligated to matame if normally you're not allowed to be matame. But if you're allowed to be matame, you're not obligated to. If they want, the kohenes could be matame. Vimlav loy matameis. The Rambam paskins that a kohen is obligated to be matame to relatives, and a kohenes is not obligated. The question is, the way the Rambam paskins is against our Gemara, because we just saw the way Rashi explains the Gemara that from our Gemara we derive that everyone is obligated to become tamei to relatives, because the Gemara says an arusa eina matama, which can mean she's not allowed to, because kohenos are not mitzuva on tumah. Eina matama must mean that since she's an arusa, she's not obligated to. But if she would have been a nesua, she would have been obligated to. So the Gemara is against the psak of the Rambam. The Rambam is against the Gemara. And this is a question that the Raavad brings up on the Rambam. The Raavad says, Bamed v'amarum b'zchar m'shuzru al atuma, Amar Avram, Kasha, Hadetanya, Ishtai, Arusa, Loy oinein v'loy metamala. It says, if his wife's an arusa, he's not an oinein, he's not metamter, v'chein hi, loy oinein, loy metamalai. She's not metame. Meaning she's not obligated to. Ha-nesua metamalai. But if she would have been nesua, she would be obligated. So the Raavad says, the Rambam is against the Gemara. So, I want to share with you an amazing answer to this question. How is the Rambam going to wiggle out of this one? The Gemara indicates that regularly somebody is obligated to metame to relatives, and the Rambam learns only a kohen is obligated to metame to. Now, according to the Rambam, if a regular person's relative passes away, you don't have to go to Levaya. Only the kohen. You hear this? You have a relative that passed away. Only the kohanim have to go. Nobody else has to go. That's the shita of the Rambam. Everybody else holds everyone has to go. Our Gemara indicates everyone has to go.
For the coin to drive home the point that there is not only are they candy, but they're supposed to.
Kohanim are supposed to. According to the Rambam, nobody else is supposed to. Nobody else has to. But our Gemara indicates everyone has to. The answer is, do you remember how Rashi learned this Gemara? Not in Kesuvos. The way he learns it in Kesuvos is against the Rambam. Rashi learned this Gemara differently in Yavamis. Let me bring to your attention how Rashi learned the same Gemara in Yavamis. Okay, this is Yavamis Chav Tes Amud Beis. V'loy metama'a. So the first pshan Rashi is Eina tzricha l'sasik bay. She doesn't have to. V'lav dafka nakad. It's lav dafka. V'loy metamis dehabenois aroin loy huzra alatuma. Ela aidi dinaka lo yoinenes means she doesn't have to, because the truth is, why would I need to say she doesn't have to? But benois aron are not muzar on tuma. Ela aidi dinaka lo yoinenes isichlei nakad v'loy metames. She's not metame. The boy lemisni tarti bedida uvedidei. In other words, the first pshat of Rashi is like Rashi says over here, that v'loy metama means she doesn't have to become Tamei, but the truth is it's not a Chiddush because women are not Muzar on Tumah. Again, from which Rashi in Kesuvos learns, she's not obligated to, everyone else is. But Rashi brings a different shot here. Velinera, you know what it means, Velay Metama? She's not Metama. It doesn't mean she's not obligated to. It means she's not allowed to. See, not allowed to, but a woman is not Musar and Tumah. Yeah, they are. By the Regalim, people are now to become Tamei. The halacha is regal time, you're now to become Tamei. So if she would be a Nesua, she would be obligated to become Tamei. V'loi metames doesn't mean she is not obligated to become Tamei, from which we would derive, but if she would be Nesua, she would be obligated. V'loi metames means she's not allowed to. But if she'd be a Nesua, she would be allowed to. But it doesn't mean she would have to. Says Rashi, "V'loy metamas v'liner v'loy metama could go in beregel like on the Yom Tov. She Yisraelim is har malatuma. Even a regular Yisrael is now to become Tamei Yom Tov time. Where do we learn that from? Mi v'nevlasam leisigo b'Masechas Rosh Hashanah. There's a totally different way to learn the Sugya. Pashup Pshat is like Rashi says here in Kesuvos. She's not obligated to become Tamei. That implies that everyone else is obligated. But there's another way to learn this. The other way to learn this is she is not allowed to become Tamei, because since she's only an Arusa, she can't for naught make herself Tamei regel time. But if she would have been in a Nesua, she would be allowed to. Would she be obligated to? The Rambam would say, I only hold a Kohen is obligated to be Metame. Nobody else is obligated. So this is another way to learn the Sugya, and this is what the Lechem Mishnah says to answer the Raavid's Kasha. The Lechem Mishnah says, Masha Amru bebraisa ishta Arusa inu metamela efshir lefaresh ledas Rabbeinu. The Rambam would explain like Tosfos explains, or the way Rashi we just read explains. The Ratzalemer inu metame beregel the chayiv adam latara atzmai. Ulekach Amru Arusa davka aval nesua muter latame afilu beregel. Ulefize asi shaper dahad deloy metame. This that you're not allowed to have a ba'arusa davka. Okay, so that's how the Raavid's kasha on the Rambam, that our Gemara is muchach, that everyone is mechuyev to metame, not so fast. There's another way to learn the Gemara. Eina metame doesn't mean she's not obligated to. Eina metame means she's not allowed to. She's not allowed to become tameh. Yeah, it's talking about beregel. Okay, that's first subject.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.